Those who disown their parents. What was the final straw? My father was an incestuous pedophile. I hadn't seen him since I was 5. I had always craved a fatherly relationship, so I decided to meet with him when I was 19. The main condition for us being in contact was total honesty. I stupidly thought our candid conversations weren't just more lies from him. A few weeks later, he made a lewd call to my 21-year-old sister. She called me in tears. I called him and threatened to kill him if he ever contacted any of us again. His wife called and tried to blame it on him being bipolar. Bipolar is awful, but it doesn't make you incestuous. He died in 2010. I haven't disowned him yet, but I'm on the verge. I had a cancer scare when I was 18. My mother told family members that I was likely being punished by God and deserved it. When I had food poisoning for weeks ago, that I deserved it and God was punishing me for staying out late and going out so much. I'm 25. I was home by 10 p.m. and I went out for a meal with a friend. It's baffling considering my parents lost a daughter, my sister, to cancer when she was 4 years old. I simply cannot understand her mindset, nor do I wish to. I just can't wait to leave. My grandma died and my dad forged her will. The previous will left everything to my sister and I. I wouldn't have cared so much. My dad took care of her the last 2 years of her life, but then his wife, and he paid for my step-brother to pursue a relationship with someone he met in South Africa, paid for her visa and immigration lawyer, then gave her his car. He got offended when I asked him how much that cost and that my grandma would not be happy with, knowing that's where her money went. We have spoken once since then. The step-brother died from COVID and she still has his car. He was physically abusive to me my whole life, and at least verbally abusive to everyone else around him. I made excuses that it was just the way he was. No point in complaining. When my son was born, I started to realize just how bad he was, and that I really didn't want him setting that example. It took years and therapy for me to see how bad it was. I gave him way too many chances. But finally I gave up and went no contact with him. It was, by far, the best decision I've ever made. My life is so much better, and we're so much happier with that asshole out of our lives. I only disowned my dad. I was working on something in my mum's living room. They were divorced already. He comes in. I say hi and carry on working. He gets all pigeon-chested and started spouting off some bollocks of "you need to give me the respect I deserve, and I'm going to put you through that wall." I was very much a standoffish teenager, so I told him to try it and squared up to him. My mum got involved and I pushed him out of the house. Seen him maybe twice in 12 years now. I already didn't care for him much after shit he pulled prior, but that was the last straw. My mum and dad know my sobriety means a lot to me. We went on a vacation together as adults. She picked arguments with, screamed at, and criticized me every single day. I kept telling her how stressed I was, how much it made me think of drinking to calm myself down over it. She would usually proceed to get my dad involved. My dad would get riled up and yell at me, which he can't help, as he has dementia and can't really reason beyond defend their Mrs. Honor. She never relented. I lost all respect for her. I never wanted to see her again. My sibling died in the days leading up to his funeral. My mother was so exquisitely awful that I stopped fantasizing about harming her, began fantasizing about my life in prison after her murder. At one point, I was standing behind her at the top of a flight of stairs as she monologued about how everything was my fault. I could have pushed her, but instead promised myself that after I made it through the funeral I'd never speak with her again. This year marks a decade since I last spoke with her. My only regret is not cutting her out of my life earlier. After years of just insanity trauma due to my mother, I kept trying to hold on to hope that she would one day be decent to me. Surprisingly, the straw that broke the camel's back was very tame compared to the rest of the things she had done to me. I had been accepted into college. I called her to tell her the good news. She proceeded to talk about herself, her college experience. I realized that she would never care about anything I accomplished. She only cared about herself. Truly, August will be 10 years since I've spoken a word to her. Mother was a career crackhead. I traveled 15 hours by Greyhound bus back to Illinois to help her finish up some roofing jobs. Still incomplete. She intentionally got in a fight with me at the bus station after the jobs were done. Didn't get me a ticket back and ghosted me on $2,500. I had maybe $30 to my name at the time. Then she shut off my cell phone immediately after driving away. Had to walk about 5 miles to a friend's house. He and a few of my other friends drove me back down to Alabama that night. Never spoke to her again. While I was visiting from out of state, an argument over me wanting to spend some of the trip with my in-laws who lived nearby. They screamed, called me names, told to get the fuck out and never come back. I didn't say anything I regretted, just left. 7 years later, I have abided by what they said. Despite their efforts to apologize and try to communicate with me, it's been a huge weight lifted. Honestly, I wish it had happened years before. I had a fucked up childhood with a hateful religion, and it's been a process letting all of that go. She stole prescription medication from my medicine cabinet during my daughter's christening lunch and blamed my brother for it. Money from my high school job that I had saved for college. Identity theft like signing my name to a car loan and taking out credit cards in my name and using my name on utilities and not paying them. I paid everything off and didn't file a police report, but I told her I would if it ever happened again. And she hasn't talked to me since. Parents got divorced between 12-14. During that period, my dad became an evangelical Christian. All of the sudden, everything revolved around God and Jesus. This continued until he moved to the US when I was 18 because America is doing the Lord's work. He completely ghosted his 2 teenage children and started a new Christian family. He came to visit one time. He never met his 3 grandchildren and died in 2022. It had been 17 years since I had seen him. I did not go to the funeral because, to me, he had been dead a long time. My mum had done and said many fucked up things to the point where I put myself through foster care. I still had on and off contact with her for a long time until this last Christmas. My mum was in jail, so she had my brother sign into her messenger to contact people. Well, what he found was messages between her and my abusive ex. He was calling her mum, asking for advice, stating he can't get over me. She replied with advice, caring words, shit-talking me, asking for rides and money. That was it. I just couldn't do it anymore. I'm a 33-year-old woman. You know, a wife, mother, fully grown productive member of society. My dad got me away from my husband to scream at me for not coddling his delusions and threatened to beat me into the ground while laughing at me and mocking me. And then as soon as we were around people again, turned back into that happy-go-lucky guy everyone knows. Then he went to my husband and brother and told them that I was upset because he put me in my place, while neglecting to explain the threats. Fucking coward. For my wife with her parents, the final straw was being blocked from going to her great-grandmother's funeral. They were already dangerously close to being cut off, but she kept trying to at least mend things with her mom, even if she couldn't forgive her dad. Then that happened, and she found out it was her mom who had stopped her uncle from flying her out to the funeral. So now, as far as my wife and I are concerned, the ex-parents may as well have jumped in the coffin with great-grandma, or they were there. Jehovah's Witnesses who abused and manipulated me and coerced me into marrying a JW man when I had just turned 17. Except I chose to marry a good guy outside of the religion despite him stepping up and being an amazing father to the kids I had with my ex-husband, who was extremely abusive and then abandoned them. Lots of sexual abuse growing up that they never reported and made me feel responsible for. I developed PTSD, and the only way for me to improve my mental health was to cut them out completely. Disowned my father after he called my biracial 4-year-old nephew the N-word to his face. I chokeslammed him through my mother's antique dining table. I got word about 8 years later that he died from the funeral home. I told them, good. Let me know where he is buried so I can come piss on his grave. To the final straw. He was barely around during my childhood, and I only really have memories of him beating the crap out of my mother and holding a gun to her head. It added up over time, just chaotic and disrespectful. I asked myself why I was suffering through this relationship when it was taking a serious toll on my mental well-being. I decided one day that I was done, and that we all deserve a soft place to land. Someone who builds you up instead of tearing you down. Someone who tells you every day that you are enough and you deserve to be loved just as you are. I was in therapy as an adult to deal with how my parents treated me as a kid. One day I had a really rough session about how my mum acted with me when I was a kid. I called her and said, "I'm going to ask you something. Don't lie. Give me the truth. Did you want to spend time with me as a kid?" And she said no in a way that told me it came from the bottom of her heart. I knew that to continue interacting with her would be an act of cruelty to myself. I cut her out of my life right then and there. My dad had contacted me about 3 times by the time I was 15. He realized he might die soon and got in contact with my brothers, and I like nothing happened. My brothers took him back very kindly. I did not. He eventually started continuously asking for money, acting like he had part in my upbringing. They finally cut him off as well. TBH, it's me being petty. My dad has about 6 kids and I'm the only girl. I like to think that his only daughter never talking to him was the karma for all he's done.